best output as possible. Thank you.
Distinguished guests. From the Japanese Embassy, we have Mr. Shinichiro Kato and Mr. Takeuchi Kiyoshi. And from the Philippines, to officially start the program, may we call on Miss Yvette Ledesma, the chairperson of the Sseayp, for her welcoming remarks.
National leaders, fellow alumni, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. National conventions such as this are great opportunities to strengthen friendship and ties. This event is a classic example of what Sseayp is all about: nurturing friendships across the seas, enhancing friendships among batchmates, and especially seeing those who were out. Once the flag is out, everybody has to be there on time. That's the Japanese time. So, our theme, Strengthening Sseayp, puts emphasis on how we can sustain the organization alongside our partners in the Cabinet Office of Japan, IYEO, the Sseayp International, and of course, the alumni. Today, we would like to come to fore and introducing to you the core which we worked on during our strategic planning. We would like also to be able to touch bases on what your ideas are to strengthen this association and to keep that fire burning. So, may I now introduce to you the members of the Sseayp International Philippines Board. Our President, Ms. Leia Babicetes. Please stand here, President. The Vice President International, Bogman Lulu, Batch 91. Vice President National, Berto from Activity. Our Secretary, Sunny Rico from Batch 81. Board of Directors composed of Shen Ong from 2010. Edwin Antonio. From Batch 2000. Batch 2002, 2000. And our batch representatives are Sammy and Samantha Javier from 2011, and Ken Primor from 2010. We also have Bible Sseayp from batch 9. Ladies and gentlemen, we comprise the Sseayp International Board and its officers.
To give us a short message, may we call on Mr. Ryan Alad, the manager of the GSIS Museum.
Good morning. Annual convention is being held here inside our museum. While most of the youth of the ASEAN member countries in Japan should always present and consider visiting museums, it is also a challenge to all of you to popularize, protect, and preserve our cultural heritage. While you were exposed to different cultures and traditions when you joined Sseayp, it is still our urgent request as heritage advocates to consider continue supporting programs and projects that will present our heritage as Filipinos. It is also our challenge to the National Youth Commission to strengthen projects that will introduce and reintroduce our heritage to our youth so we can minimize disrespect to our heritage. For all we know, built heritage like old and historical buildings are being demolished left and right. Filipino artworks are being undervalued in terms of monetary value and oftentimes neglected. Some museums are being closed for lack of funds and redirections for the city's museum. Entities that will support and provide assistance in saving our heritage and popularizing our Filipino heritage. Sooner or later, working for heritage. This is the only way we can say that we own a corner of this museum and document your short stay here. I am allowing you to take photos, take pictures of all the artworks here, and bring it home. For maybe soon these artworks will go to the National Museum. Success. Magandang umaga.
Thank you, Mr. Paet. And now let's hear some short message from Mr. Takeuchi Kiyoshi from the Japanese Embassy.
Minasama, ohayo gozaimasu. Magandang sa inyong lahat. It's really pleasure to see all of you. I understand with regard to the Sseayp, you are selected, participant, and then you are tasked to be fulfill, important role in the various fields of nation building. So in that sense, that I hope that you refresh your mind, memories, experiences, which you shared with your other countrymen when you participated. I hope that this meeting will come out with very meaningful and fruitful result. Thank you very much.
I'm really very privileged to be introducing a person who's very, very close to all of us. I have a very important information for everyone. I'd like you to know that the Honorable Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the author of Republic Act 8044 that created the National Youth Commission. Please bear that in mind. Okay. Ramon Galvin Cardenas, more familiarly known as Eki, here and abroad, was born on August 31, 1942 in the city of Manila. He is a graduate of Ateneo de Manila University with a bachelor's degree in economics, first honors, cum laude, and holds a master's degree in economic planning and development from Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, USA. And he also took courses leading to a doctorate degree. His areas of specialization are economic planning and development, regional planning and development, public administration, business management, management consultancy, international development, and economic diplomacy. Currently, he is the Chief of Staff of Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at the Philippines. Well, to his credit, president, he has served 3 Philippine presidents. I think he has to be applauded for that. When he joined the stable of technocrats of the former president of the former Program Implementation Agency, or the PIA, under then President Diosdado Macapagal in 1963. I was born then. When he returned for his graduate studies abroad in 1967, he was invited to join the government of then President Ferdinand Marcos, where he served for about 18 years. Of course, it's not, everyone knows that during that period, the Sseayp was born. And Mr. Cardenas was very instrumental in the forging of that memorandum of understanding. Ramon Eki Cardenas.
Thank you very much. You had a very brief introduction. Because I plan to give a long speech. 38 years is a long time for me to have a lot of insights to share with you. So before I do that, I'd like to again greet our friends from the Japanese Embassy, Director Kiyoshi Takeuchi of the Japan Information and Cultural Center, and of course Mr. Shinichiro Kato of the Japanese Embassy. I'm sure Mr. Kato will not remember me because you may not have been born yet when we did the first round of meetings to establish this program in 1973 and ended up in 74. And of course, Yvette, I don't know how to say hello to her because I've known her for 38 years now. We just have a few years difference in age. And Leah, of batch 75, whom I can say that we have been meeting regularly since then. And so Leah remembers how my black hair turned to gray over the past 38 years. And of course, our host for today, Raimundo Palad of the GSIS Museum. I'd like to not only greet you, but to thank you for sharing your resources with us for this morning. I don't know where to start, really. If I give 1 minute to every third year of those 38 years, that will be 38 minutes. But in all of those 38 years, there were also times when I think I should give about 10 minutes for each of those years. But I won't do that. I did prepare a speech. Actually, if you see papers here, these are recollections which I made, which I've been doing over the years. As you may know, the Sseayp was started in 1974, and that was 38 years ago. You can imagine how young we all were when we started this. And that was the time when I was an undersecretary in the office of the president, in the executive office, where I was an undersecretary Alejandro Melchor then. And being the youngest at that point in time in the sub-cabinet, when this program was being prepared, fortunately, President Marcos appointed me to take charge of getting this program going. And so I was sent to Japan, to the office of the foreign minister and the prime minister, because if you will recall, this was a project of the Prime Minister of Japan to foster closer friendship with the ASEAN neighbors. And I felt really privileged because then I was very young also. And the fact that this was a group for the youth and a project for the ASEAN neighbors together with Japan, I felt that this was a very important project worth pursuing and worth bringing to the attention of all the ASEAN governments, considering that at that point in time, the government of Japan was very much in the process of trying to heal the wounds of the Second World War. And for your information, Takuchi-san, I was born during the Second World War. And my father was one of the heroes of Bataan. He was a medical doctor and he was asked to join the medical team in Bataan then. And unfortunately, that is where he met his untimely death. And I was in the womb of my mother then. So if there's a meaning to this whole thing, one of the things that I would immediately say is that there is such a thing as healing. And I felt that this was the first message of this project, the message of healing the wounds. And I believe that even if our family was a victim, there's such a thing as looking to the future, and you can only do that if you have the spirit of healing. And healing, I think, was the message when this program and project was first introduced to our region. With that as a background, I would like to say that, and I hope you don't mind, when the manager of this museum, Mr. Palad, was talking about heritage, I'd like to connect that to the welcome remarks of Yvette when she said that we have such a thing as Filipino time. We started late, and I hope that that's not part of our heritage, and I hope you will erase in your mind that there is such a thing as Filipino time. Because, as you all know, in your respective professions, time is very precious. You cannot bring back 1 hour or 2 hours of wasted time. If you want to be productive, you'd like to move on, you'd like to give a better contribution to whatever you're doing in any of your endeavors, you should remember that time is a very important ingredient. So I'm saying this because I grew up with that discipline of time. When I was starting my government career, when I was 25 years old in the office of the president, that was during the Marcos time. I started when I was 19 during the Macapagal regime. And one of the very basic things that was inculcated to us as Yvette said, technocrats then was the concept of discipline of time. And I'm really very much of a disciple of time, because not only will you be able to produce, I'm an economist also, and the concept of time is very important to productivity. And I would like to request all of you that if you will have your chance to talk to your fellow alumni, whenever we plan any activity, whenever we plan any project, whenever we plan any gathering, I hope that you will record that time is of the essence, and that this is not part of Philippine heritage, that being late is not being Filipino. In fact, being punctual is a sign of a disciplined Filipino. We are now in the 38th year of Sseayp, and I hope that we can cure that when we reach the age of 40. Okay? And to our guests from the Japanese Embassy, on behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to express our apologies that we weren't able to start on time. My office is right up the back. We are tenants of GSIS. And I was telling Leia that I will surely be there. And I was telling Yvette when they came to the office that I'll be on time. And anyway, that is a message from my brother, not from a disciplinarian. It's just that I would like to make sure that we're starting everything right. If you have to strengthen Sseayp, the very basic importance of discipline should be inculcated when you're trying to strengthen an organization. And I mean this, it's from the heart. Secondly is, when I read your letter asking me to be your guest speaker today, I felt I had mixed feelings. Again, I'm being very transparent here. Mixed feelings because of the fact that when President Estrada was president, again, and the Sseayp was on its, I don't know what year that was. All of a sudden, Secretary Zamora tells me, Eki, since you handled this during the time of President Marcos, would you kindly handle this again for President Estrada? At the time, as you know, I was already Senior Deputy Executive Secretary, and eventually I headed TMS, and eventually I became Chief of Staff of President Estrada. Again, when that was given to me as a responsibility, I immediately accepted because I already knew what Sseayp was. I knew the difficulties. I knew also the strengths of Sseayp. Kaya noon, hindi ako natatubili na tanggapin yung sinabi ni Secretary Zamora to take over the Sseayp program. In between, I was every now and then invited to the Sseayp activities when the ship docked in Manila. Every now and then I said, because there were many times when I was not even informed of what was going on. Nonet knows that, and the other officers know that. And that's why I said I accepted this guest speaking today with mixed feelings. Because of the fact that I had been monitoring Sseayp, to be honest with you. Would you believe it's 38 years ago? And if you date back to the time we started this, I was barely 31 years old. And I was a young technocrat, very eager to serve government and very much involved in the program of development and growth for our country. And when I say mixed feelings, because I feel that 38 years is a very long time for this association to have grown, to have been strong, to have been part of the development process of this country, to be part of nation. And that's why when President Marcos gave me the marching orders to go to Japan, he said, there are two things that I'd like you to remember, Mr. Secretary. One, you're going there as a representative of the government of the Philippines, particularly the office of the President. And remember that you'll be dealing with the office of the Prime Minister. And so these are the two highest offices of government. You're young, but don't let your youth distract you from your mission. These are very strong words from the President. And when you're young, I'd like you to show that you have the maturity of the youth of the Philippines. And at the same time, you have the discipline that you are supposed to bring to a government that is very disciplined, which earlier was said by Yvette. And I can tell you that when I went there, I was really awed by the discipline that I met when we went to Japan. First, the order of the day was there, the program, the speakers, the time. And it's really, they time every minute of what you say. They tell us, because somebody's representing Indonesia, somebody's representing the ASEAN countries then, which were not as many as now. And we were informed you have only 10 minutes to present your government's program or whatever message you'd like to give from your respective governments. And they were really timed. And then we will have lunch. Then after lunch, we will be presenting to you the first year program of the Nippon Maru, and that's how we would expect all of you here to coordinate for us and with us the first ship for Southeast Asian Youth Voyage in our region. And then, in the evening, we were honored with a dinner where we got to meet those people who were going to be involved with this program. You can say that it was all very well timed, and by the following day, we were again leaving Tokyo back to Manila. We went there the day before, the one-day program coordination, and we left one day after. But it was very well done, very incisive, very articulate, and to the credit of the Japanese government, we met all the different personalities who were going to be involved in the first voyage of the ship for Southeast Asian youth. So that was 38 years ago. And again, during those times, after 38 years, I was in charge of years 75 and 74, the first two batches. And we started with a zero budget. I'd like to say that because when we met in Japan, the budget for 74 was already, for the country, was already programmed, and it was not in the budget of the Office of the President. So when I came back and briefed Secretary Melchor, who was the Executive Secretary, and also the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, I informed them that this is exactly the program, this is the project, and this is the timetable. So the next thing I was forced to present to them was, sir, wala po tayong budget. I'm not saying this because of the fact that we were hamstrung by a zero budget, but we had to be innovative. We had to think ways of how to implement the first year of Sseayp on a zero budget. How did we do it? Well, you know, President Marcos is the type of a president, when he gives you a marching order, you have to produce. You don't go to him and say, we have a problem. Because the problem, if you're a part of his cabinet, you're there because you're there to solve the problem. So that's what we did in the first year. First, I organized the local implementing committee. I think if you will remember, where's Yvette? She cannot validate what I'm saying now because she's not here. You know, I think I will have to discipline Yvette eventually again. But anyway, first was the organization. We had to form a team of who was going to be the implementing arm of this. Of course, I chaired it, but we have a representative from the Department of Foreign Affairs, a representative from the National Media Production Center then, because of the very important aspect of information that was supposed to be presented. Thirdly was, of course, the Office of the President. And then fourthly, if you will remember, at that time, I think we were still under martial law. And so we had to have a representative from the Department of National Defense. And then finally from the Department of Tourism, that was then represented by one of the assistant secretaries. Welcome back, Yvette. I was just telling them that I was trying to recall how we started, and I was going to ask you to validate it. But since you were not here, I asked them to call you. Because I don't want to make a mistake right now, because at the age of 69, going 70, your memory starts to fail. And that's where I am right now. Anyway, and of course, we had the media with us, the national media, because we needed information. When we had to publicize this whole project, it had to be in the newspapers. So that's why the national media and the Department of Public Information then was very crucial to this whole project to be announced, the whole country, because we were not only catering to Manila, but we were organizing for the whole of the Philippines to be participant of this. And fortunately, we had that. The Department of Tourism helped us with all the information needed. And then the Department of Foreign Affairs, because we needed all sorts of passports, We needed help in doing this thing with the Embassy of Japan to facilitate the visas. And the Department of National Defense, because of the fact that at that point in time, discipline was a very important aspect of the representation of the Philippines in this collectivity. With zero budget, what we did was, since we had these representatives from the different organizations of government, we asked them if we could get part of their budget, Department of National Defense. We had then what they call the Office of Civil Relations. So we asked then head of the Civil Relations, which was Colonel Eduardo Ermita, whom you remember was Executive Secretary during the time of GMA. Then we had his deputy then was Colonel Honesto Isleta, who became the head of Batch 75. So in other words, kumuha kami ng mga budget nila. You know, 10,000 din in the budget of a deputy of a organization was big. So if they give you 50,000 pesos, that was already big. We got that from the Department of National Defense. We got the budget from the national media by way of the production of all these publications that we needed. And then, of course, the Department of Tourism. And all of these things were put together by small budgets, which eventually came up to, in effect, make this project a success. Uniforms. We asked our network in the private sector. At that time, Lytton Mills was very active. So the uniforms, the materials were all, what you may call it, donated to us by the private sector. And a few other things. Like when the homestay was here, part of the drinks, part of everything that we served was a donation of San Miguel Corporation. I'm just saying this because whenever you have an activity, you never will say we have no money. Because it's easy to generate resources, money and manpower, if you're committed to making sure and ensuring that your project is going to be a success. And I'm saying this because I hope during those times, from 1974 to now, I've been hearing a lot of things about we cannot do this because we have no money. We cannot do this because there's no government budget. We cannot do this because we lack resources, both money and manpower. I hope that your distribution are properly allocated, or you're able to bring it to being. And you can easily do this. There are 38 years of so many of, let's say 30 to 35 of you involved. Multiply that. It's impossible that your network is very small. You cannot say that you have no congressmen among you, you have no governors among you, you have no government officials, mayors, highly placed people in the private sector, that you cannot generate resources. Impossible yan. And that is what sometimes gives me a feeling that we are not really doing our best to propel this organization to much, much greater heights. I still will always not accept lack of resources as a reason for failure. I grew up in this environment, in government, as well as when I was in the private sector, when I was president of Xerox Philippines. And that's what I was telling our Japanese friends here. I used to go to Japan every year because Philippine Fuji Xerox was Japan-based. And I was president of that for a number of years, from 76 to the time that I went back to the Marcos administration again to head NEDA.
as acting Director General of the National Economic Development Authority. But as you can see, I was involved with government agencies that have been always resource generating, planning, coming up with programs and projects. In the executive office during the time President Marcos, I was Assistant Executive Secretary for Development Affairs, which meant planning and organizing for development. And that's when we organized what we call the PROD, the Presidential Regional Officer for Development, and the DMS, which was the forerunner of the PMS. Because our task then was that we were asked all the different agencies of government could make their plans, submit it to Malacanang, and we put that in a development plan for the country. We also had to think of the resources that was going to properly implement this plan. So that was my role in the Office of the President then. After that, I became President of Xerox. And after so many years, and President Marcos was reorganizing, again, he got me back as the Senior Deputy Minister then, because it was the parliamentary government in charge of NEDA. I could not become, I was only acting Director General because I was also concurrently assigned to the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. when it was the time of Ambassador Benjamin Romualdez. I was in charge of the economic section of the embassy and very much involved in the negotiations with the U.S. government when the basis agreement was already tapering down and when we had to talk about basis rental. And that was my role then. The rental, we had to negotiate those rentals until the time that the bases were restored back to the Philippines. And part of that was, of course, not only the rental, but the compensation for the time that these bases would eventually revert back to the Philippine government. So that was my return to the office of the president, NEDA then. And of course, the rest is history. In '86, we had to step out because of the change in government then. And for those years, I was very much in the private sector until President Estrada came to the presidency and decided to form his cabinet and was brought back as in charge of the, as the Senior Deputy Executive Secretary and concurrently his Chief of Staff and eventually took over the Presidential Management Staff. And it was during those years in 1998, 1999 and 2000, then that I returned to the fold of the Sseayp when the ship came to the Philippines. So you can see I was again involved with this program. And then the rest is history again. President Estrada was ousted, but of course we went out with him. And then now it's more than 10 years since that time. And during those days, I used to get invited every now and then to your organization's activities, either when the ship was there or not. When Nonet was there, the National Youth Commission, they would every now and then remember to invite me, so I would go. But in all of this, I'm making this narration because in all of this, Sseayp had its ups and downs. And I always felt bad when I would hear stories of difficulties. You know, kung ikaw isang tatay ng isang pamilya at pinalaki mo yung anak mo, at nakikita mo yung anak mo ay minsan may problema, I hope you don't mind by speaking. I'm sure you know, you understand. You've always to feel bad. And I've always felt this for Sseayp. A few years ago, I was invited to Cebu by an organization of part of you, I think, you know, and I was asked again to guest And they gave me a plaque and saying, the father of Sseayp. But when I was there and I received the plaque, I saw that it was not all of Sseayp that was there. It was apparently a faction of Sseayp. And again, I asked them, they had it in the waterfront hotel in Cebu. What is happening to Sseayp? And of course, I got one side of the story, but then I would also talk to people like Leia, I would talk to people at the time that we were holding this with Dante Lanti, when he was the head of the Sseayp, during the time of the first year, I handled it again. You know, I'm just being very transparent with you today, because if you want to strengthen an organization, you have to make sure that you know where you're starting from, the strengths as well as the weaknesses of an organization. I've been very much an organization. I retired from government, but then I was brought back when Senator Marcos decided to run for the Senate, and has been very much part of the Marcos family. I accepted the mandate and the challenge. I took care of his campaign, and when he became senator, I was asked to be chief of staff. And one of the senators, when he saw me in the Senate, when the first day of it, he said, "Ricky, you were a cabinet member, you were like this. How come you accepted to be the chief of staff? Don't you think this is a demotion?" And my answer to that was no. In life, every day is a learning process. Titles are not that important. What is important is your contribution to national development. Titles are just an appendage to what you are for that given point in time in history. Whether you're up, whether you're down, when you go 6 feet underground, those titles will be forgotten by the generations after you. What is important is what you did for those years that you were active, both in government and private sector, but most important, when you were a participant and a contributor to national development. And so I was very enthused when Leia came to me and Yvette, when they told me that the subject was strengthening Sseayp. Because really, let's face it, we really have to strengthen. But the assumption here is to strengthen an organization means the organization is not that strong, or it has its own weaknesses. And let's start from there. For an organization to be strong, one is unity. You cannot run an organization with factions. There will always be people and groups that will try to bring you down or to disenfranchise you. And my only request at this time is, please, let's all get together. Get all the years, 38 batches together, not necessarily all of them, but at least representatives from each of them. If I have to be involved in this, I'll do it. Because eventually, I will really have to retire again. But if there is one legacy I'd like to leave as part of my government service, is the legacy of strengthening and putting Sseayp on its strong feet. I'm not saying this because, as they called me in Malacanang, I was the midwife of Sseayp. The important thing is when you have an organization, you have an organization that's very strong. Strong in the sense that you have the manpower. Every time I hear that, when I'm in the Senate and there's a hearing, somebody comes to me. So Ricky, it's like this, like that, but I'm now vice president of this corporation. I go to a province, and then somebody welcomes me. Welcome to Capiz. Remember me? I am so and so. And I was in batch something. You are our leader. I mean, not you were the one in charge of the whole organization. And that's multiplied all over the country, from Apari to Wolo. Even the National Youth Commission members, the commissioners. you're all part of the Sseayp alumni. I don't see why you can't make a go of this in a very strong way. I really feel really that, if I only have all those resources, I will help you do it. But I will maybe help you when I was introduced, part of my supposed area of expertise is organization and management. I try to do that. In organization, there's such a thing as resource generation. And that's very important. But resources is not only money, it's how all of you bring with you an expertise, bring with you a specialization, bring with you a network that you revolve in. A government official in a local government already has that. If you're in the private sector, you're vice president, okay, we have this project. Okay, how much can you generate from your company? Because each company has what you may call representation budget, public affairs budget, etc. And therefore, you can ask. Like in San Miguel Corporation, I always call one of the Sseayp alumni there, si Charles Owen of Batch 75. Ever since I needed something for a project or what, and we needed drinks, we needed San Miguel products, we needed some. I always call Charles Owen. Chuck is always there. Hanggang ngayon, as part of our contribution to government. So, and you have so many of you. I mean, if I get, let's have a directory, and I can tell you, each one of you, put a directory 74, 75 all the way back. I hope we will have a right and complete directory when we celebrate our 40 years. That's another challenge for you. Get a good directory, the names, they're all alive, where they belong, their email addresses, because we are in a generation of paperless communications, as well as their. That's very important. In fact, we have what we call the Cornell alumni of the Philippines, where I came from in the United States. We are celebrating our 100th year now as a Filipino organization for that university. And I'm chairing the whole thing. And the very first thing that we did was to organize again. The first basic thing was information. Where is everybody, dead or alive? Because we'd like all of us to be around in November. If they're not around, at least their families, their wife, children. Because then, we date back to 100 years ago, I'm sure. Half of that's maybe gone already. But I'm saying this is because information is very important. Without that, you cannot communicate. Without that, you cannot explain your program. Without that, you cannot say, these are our plans and projects. And if you cannot communicate that, they will not be interested. They don't know what you're doing. I've been there, I don't know what's going on, but if you tell them exactly what you're headed for, I'm sure that they should get the majority. There will always be recalcitrants, there will be people who will not be interested, but I'm sure that they're a minority. But bring a lot of them back to the fold. But you cannot bring them back to the fold if all you're talking about is the ship is coming next year, please be there. The ship is coming back, please help us with homestay. Hindi rin. You have to have a program where we're also giving, we're also sharing, and we're asking them to be participating.
The ladies. No, I know. I don't stand the committee. We have to start somewhere.
re-energizing for our afternoon session.
The GSIS Museum for accommodating the event for this day. Thank you so much, Mr. Palad of GSIS Museum. Honorable Ferdinand P. Marcos Jr. Okay, so the food is already being prepared, so let's all partake in this small luncheon that we have for today.
Please, Dawson.
This morning. And then since then, we had 5 regular board meetings and also some special meetings that were called for when necessary. We had one strategic planning workshop done in Subic, wherein we crafted the vision
Undertaken during the last annual convention. If there are no other observations or suggestions for corrections,
I move for the approval with amendments.
all right, thank you for that. It has been moved and seconded, so can we move on? So we now say that we are adopting everything that has been taken up during the last convention. Thank you very much for that. Can we move on to the next?
That's okay, I'm not that tall, just members. Our guest speaker has shared with us this morning. I felt that he was speaking on behalf of me as your president. And when I heard the secretary reporting to you the activities, I felt also that that was part of my report. Having these organization for the past 38 years, I'd like to focus more as what have Mr. Cardenas have shared with us, more on the membership. You have heard the projects that we have started since we were elected in November 2011. And the projects and planning sessions were all formulated by your present board. Now, however, we still have a problem, a situation which mostly came from NCR, which is Manila. But when in 1979, that's where the KB came in, which we will furnish you in due time as a challenge to what Mr. Cardenas have said. We will come up with a directory of all the members together with as part of his business in Hong Kong. So these are things that we would like to already start, and we can also schedule the General Assembly in time for the ASEAN Week, which your board has passed a resolution on that matter. However, the Constitution and bylaws of Sseayp says that we have to put the General Assembly every second week of April. So we had to go back to the original date. So communications-wise, our Vice President National, Ms. Bebot Cuerdo, please, made a lot of efforts together with our vice, all the announcements to this General Assembly. So a lot of people let's take the challenge of Mr. Cardenas and let's work together and we move forward with, of course, the assistance of you guys present here, our members present here. Let's work together for a more active organization. And without you also members, we're not going to be here. And this association will never be successful if you will not extend also or reach out your assistance to us. We will do our very best for resources. Yung may mga malalaking businesses dyan, pwede namang mag-share tayo sa association. We would welcome that in any way you can, either in cash or in kind, because right now all the files we are trying to collect all the files from the past officers. So at least if we have an office, it's all intact, maybe later on, if we can afford, we can get a secretariat to work for us and try to pay the overhead expenses through. I'd like to show you I'd like to inform you that the Sseayp conference to be held in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, this April 25 to 29 will be attended, 28 will be attended by 28 participants from our country. I think we should thank the members of this delegation because it is not cheap for everyone, to spend this money on behalf of the association. Kasi alam namin na medyo mahal dahil you have to take care of your transportation expense, you have to take care of the $500 registration fee. So medyo mahal.
They still continue with their fund. The time that they started this fundraising, the tuition fee of UP students was only 6,500 pesos. But unfortunately, UP already increased the tuition fee to more than 20,000. So they're able to send less number of students, but they still continue to do so. Sometimes, I think Sseayp was able to attend some fundraiser before. In fact, they presented